ready to crumble.
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. All right, welcome to my live stream. Let me know how the audio is. I try to have it nicely set up in here. I'm going to be working on comics today. I'm going to be working on Not Death But Love, the Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And I'm excited to be working on comics today. I caught up on all my homework I'm going to college to kind of get my credential finished up, and so it'll be my third degree, which is insane. And so I had a ton of homework. I had about a week's worth of homework to kind of catch up on. And yeah, so anyhow, let me fix this light real quick because I noticed that it's blowing out. So hold on 1 second. I think that's as best as it's going to be fixed. And then I realized if I'm doing a solo stream, there's really no reason for me to have my headphones on, which is kind of cool. So anyhow, we're going to work on comics late into the night. It's a Saturday night. It's about 8 o'clock. And I'm excited. Let's get this going. So let's go over to the daily stream. Over here, what you're going to see is basically the page that I'm going to try to do the tones for. So I'm going to try to do all the different value and shading on here. And then I also realize I'm going to have to fix some of the I'm going to have to fix some of the line art because for some reason I must have been tired when I did this yesterday because I was working late into the night. But for some reason I gave Elizabeth Sophie's haircut, so we can't have that. So I'm going to fix Sophie's hair to be Elizabeth's hair, and then we'll kind of work from there. Let me make this a little smaller too. I still have this sized for art casters, so hopefully everything's running smooth here. From what I see on OBS, it looks like everything's running pretty smooth. Let me put this up so you can kind of see the cheap Wacom tablet that I'm working on. And we'll just kind of get into it. So it's been a really busy week, but very meaningful week. We had a really good conversation on Artcasters the other day with a man who started Disabled Comics, and it was a really inspiring conversation. It's somebody who had I think spina bifida and was wheelchair ridden from birth, and basically decided to make a superhero who kind of reflects more about him and his own unique struggles, and have a character that actually has the disability, like a superhero who has the disability that he has, which I think is just really inspiring and cool. His biography was really cool and fascinating. It was a really encouraging conversation, and kind of highlight for me one of the really cool things about art that I think sometimes flies under the radar, which is like art as a tool for self-expression, art as a tool to challenge status quos and to challenge ideas of people. And I think Corey and I used to talk about this a little bit back when we did 48-hour art check, but we used to talk about how art is kind of like an empathy machine. Like it's like a way to kind of get a window into other people and their feelings and thoughts and stuff like that. And I've had a week that's kind of reinforced that, like some really meaningful moments, like with students that I teach, just really feeling the impact of teaching, like in a really good way, where you really start seeing like your own positive impact on people's lives. And it's my second year doing it, and so like that's been really cool to kind of see, like at the high school level. And it's been really cool to just kind of see just how meaningful of a job it is compared to like any other job that I've had. And so that's been really fun. It's been a nice change of pace because I have, definitely where I was an art director before, I definitely was at a point where kind of felt like I was working for the profits of people I'm not necessarily even agreed with. And after a while, it just kind of felt like filling junk piles. And I feel like the thing I like now is making art that's meaningful to me, choosing the work that I do professionally and working on making hopefully beautiful books. I think that's like a really cool thing. And also it's kind of a rare thing too. Let me make sure that the audio is kind of working on this too, because I'm noticing it's a little, hold on a sec. Let me double check my audio. Let's do checking on YouTube. So if you guys hear something weird, it's probably just me checking this YouTube just to make sure everything is coming through okay. Let's see here. I don't know if I want to go to YouTube Studio here. But I want to make sure it's streaming. I want to make sure my audio is okay, because I've had some weird audio issues on some of these things. So before I kind of go on for a long time live streaming, I want to at least make sure we're broadcasting and people can hear us. So let's hear what it says. Okay. I'm hearing an ad. Hopefully you guys aren't. Okay, and I'm just going to check real quick that the audio is coming through. My goodness, they're running two ads on this channel. Sorry, guys. Perfect. Okay, my audio is coming through nice and clear. That's good. So what I'm going to do right now is basically shade these panels, and I'll just kind of continue down like some stuff I've been thinking about. But yeah, I think sometimes cartoonists will like forget the art of things, and it's interesting because the type of comics I do are kind of artsy fartsy type comics. I do like very indie type comics that tell like autobiographical stories, or in this case, the one I'm working on is telling like a historical fiction story, and they're for entertainment, but there's something like I'm trying to kind of make like literary type works. And yet, even though I'm doing that, it's like I will forget sometimes. I I think the world does a good job of making cartoonists and comic book artists forget that what we're doing is art. Like it is art. Is one of the oldest forms of art, around. And like one of the main pursuits of art is to express like stories that hopefully we're saying something important. Even if we're doing humor or something like that, thinking about it, it's like that's kind of the primary function of art, is that, or helping people see behind kind of the the Emperor's New Clothes is a good example of what an artist does. A lot of the time the artist is going to be making art that's like saying that the emperor has no clothes, right? Like generally that's kind of one of the functions society has for artists. And so without like tooting our own horn or being like too self-righteous about art or something, I feel like at a better place in my life, because lately all I'm doing is like what seems like really meaningful work. Like I feel like I'm working on a really important and good story that will be both entertaining and also have like some pretty deep themes to it that hopefully will get people thinking, and also people learning a little bit about Elizabeth Barrett Browning as well. And at the same time, like I also feel like I'm kind of growing, and helping people, which is really cool. So I don't know. It's been a really profoundly meaningful year, with a lot of work, but at the same time, all the work feels more fulfilling and more meaningful because it's like more impactful of I think in general. But I think artists need to remember that too, that like what you're doing can have an impact. You can make important things. Even talking to that guy who had done Disabled Comics, which you guys should totally check that out on, I think it was on Scott's channel last week, but the last Artcasters we did. It's like this guy's having a really positive impact on, young people. Like he met a kid at a convention who had the same disability as he did and was just like over the moon to see a character that basically had the same thing. And I think sometimes maybe we sell ourselves short with like what we're pursuing or what we're trying to do. Or sometimes like, I don't know. I know that when I was an art director, I think I probably had talked myself into staying in that position for a couple reasons. One was because it just sounded really good on paper. Like it's a pretty cool thing to be an art director. It's one of those things like I never thought I'd be. And so I was like, whew, this is pretty righteous job kind of, and then I think after a while, it was kind of like my family kind of relied on that check and stuff. And so I kind of justified it in that way where it was like, well, because it became clear to me after a while that where I was working at the time was like kind of had become slightly toxic, at least for me. And they were really like people who, like a lot of the people there like had become real like cutthroat and political, and so it ended up being this kind of scenario where I just kind of like for years had like justified it working there because I was like, well, we need the money and I'm supporting my family, and and we were making okay products and stuff, but it's like after a while it became kind of like I wish I could remember the term, but it's like have you ever heard of that thing where if someone is it's like a phenomenon. There's a term for it that I'm blanking out on. Oh, I just remembered. I don't have to wear these. There's a phenomenon that happens sometimes when somebody's held hostage. and they'll like start. If anyone's watching and kind of remembers the term for this, let me know. But it's basically like it's happened where someone who's held hostage will start kind of feeling empathy and connection with the captor, with the person who held them hostage. And it's just like this kind of phenomenon where, you know, part of it's probably our survival instincts. But people will start feeling like almost like connected or care about their captors and stuff. And it's like, I think a little bit of that happened where I was working before, where it was like, I think I had like convinced myself that I was in a good place and stuff like that. But in retrospect, man, just being at a job where I'm appreciated and I work with people who are really awesome, and what I'm doing is like has a value, like a net value. I think a net positive for society. I just like, I don't know, like my mental well-being has massively improved from that. And being able to be a little more selective with the art that I'm doing has been a really nice thing too, where, you know, I don't have to, you know, like make products or art that I don't necessarily want to. And that's pretty awesome. That's like a really nice place to be. Not saying we can all get there, but I think that fills the void or the soul of an artist. And that's kind of the part that I was going to talk about, was like, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about the fact that people who make art forget they're artists. I do it all the time. I forget I'm an artist all the time. I'll even say like I'm a cartoonist, or sometimes I'll say I'm a writer, you know, because I've written graphic novels and stuff. But it's like I'll forget to just say I'm an artist. Like that's what I do. And I think like the nice thing about the artist term, and why I almost feel like those of us doing comics ought to adopt this term more often, is that like artists want to create stuff. Like we want to make stuff, and quite often the stuff we want to make isn't always going to be like basically like filling the coffers of like the Medici family. Like if you think back to like old art history, a lot of early painters and stuff were pretty much commercial artists, right? It was like a rich you know, noble person would basically pay an artist to kind of make like, you know, they'd commission them to make like religious art. And quite often a lot of that art was made by like artists who didn't even believe the religion that they were, you know, making the art of. And so, you know, like art, notoriously like commercial art is a field where it's like, if you're going to make a living as an artist, like you do have to make some compromises, and quite often make, you know, pretty much like illustrations or paintings for the wealthy. You know, unfortunately, that is a part of the history of art, right? If you think about, you know, like a lot of the artists during the Renaissance, right? That was kind of the only gig in town, was like to do, you know, massive paintings or sculptures for like the Catholic Church, or like really lewd paintings for like certain gentlemen's like private collections or something. So it's not like what I was doing as an art director was all that different. But what I'm thinking about is like, but you also have things like the Decameron and other kind of plays and stuff that almost like kind of stuck it to the authorities at the time, or kind of pointed out like injustices in society, or like even in their commissions, like kind of sneaking in like something of substance. Or if you think of like, you know, like the Impressionists in France, doing things like challenging challenging like basically like the at the time kind of the version of the explicit lyrics kind of warning on music. Like back in the day, there were like rules about what somebody could depict when they painted, and a couple of the impressionists in the salon in France like decided to kind of challenge that by like and some of them ended up in like major legal trouble for it, because they paint like there was a rule about painting nudes at the time, where if you drew a nude, like they couldn't look at you, like the subject of the painting couldn't make eye contact with the viewer, because if they made eye contact, it was considered profanity. And so a lot of the a couple of the early impressionist painters actually did that. They just do a painting that was a nude, but the nude's looking right at you, like, and it was intentional when they did that, because they were kind of challenging what society was saying was okay, and sometimes getting in trouble for it, you know. But like you see this over and over again in the history of art, is like artists kind of challenging the status quo, challenging what's okay, telling stories that kind of highlight something, or highlight injustice, or highlight, you know, just something about the human condition. And you know, you have stories of writers and artists who did this in their lifetime and really never saw any sort of financial benefit from it, you know. But yet we have this like great library of books and music and stories and stuff that we can kind of draw on to, like, I don't know, you know, to like to kind of see something important about ourselves or about the world. And you know, art can really change ideas. Books can change ideas. Books can change people's thinking, you know. And we're not like necessarily the most important people on the planet or anything, but it's like, to kind of accept that you're an artist, I think should almost be like the first part of making art, is like, it's okay to be an artist. It's okay to be a little weird or divergent, because honestly, like, I mean, I think most artists are pretty bored with the norm, you know, like, or not bored, maybe just disinterested or incapable of engaging with like the norm, you know. So I don't know, that's just something I've been thinking about lately. The fact that I'm really thankful to like be in a scenario where I can make art and do something positive, rather than the 10 years I spent art directing, where I feel like I you know, I was a decent art director. I made a lot of money for my company, but you know, the owner of that company wasn't a good person. You know, like, so I was filling the wallet of like this person who's not a good person, you know. And like, I don't really miss doing that, like the kind of compromises, you know, that you kind of have to live through with you know, with working for a big company or a big corporation. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. I'm just saying my soul feels better. My soul feels better not participating in that system. So, yeah. So anyhow, so that's one thing that's hit me pretty hard this week, like in a good way, where it's like, I've just been thinking about that. A lot of interesting things. I know the Dodgers are going to make it to the playoffs, but I think it's kind of a question of like how well we make it to the playoffs, because we've been really inconsistent. Speaking of, you know, voids and silliness, I guess we're ahead though. That's good. We're ahead of San Francisco right now. I'll kind of keep the score up here just so I can keep track of that. And then today my goal is just to kind of get this going. And I am getting that warning that that YouTube is having some issues. So hopefully those kind of settle down a little bit. Make sure I've got any kind of links that are unnecessary closed too. Maybe that'll help. But yeah, so hopefully this isn't like just freezing as I'm going. It looked pretty fluidly connected before. So yeah, today I was filling out term papers and caught up on sleep because a lot of these weeks have been just like completely sleepless weeks. But when it comes to like the weekend, it like ends up being this magical time to like crunch, do a lot of homework, and then catch up on getting some rest. And we had a union event on Wednesday, and that was kind of fun. Whenever they do these union events, it's pretty cool. They will cover like a local place that has like an arcade and stuff. So you can have like the family come to the event, and the kids get like these coins for the arcade machines and stuff. So they get to like just rock the arcades for like a night. And that's pretty fun because you get to catch up with all the other teachers in the district, and the kids get to have fun and kind of like play in the arcade and stuff. So Ben was stoked about that. So we played a lot of little silly arcade games on Wednesday night. And he was stoked. I think like those things are so fun, especially when you're it's so expensive to do like an arcade, but it's like when it's comped, it's a lot of fun because like he gets to get like a little, like a toy exchanging his tickets and stuff. And we got to play a little bit of air hockey. He's gotten better at air hockey. That used to be my jam when I was younger. And it was kind of neat to see that he's improved a lot. Like I didn't have to pull punches when I was playing him. He's just gotten incredibly good at it. But yeah, so yeah, that's basically where we're at. I did homework most of the day. I got a lot of sick people in the house, like the wife's sick, the son is sick, my wife's sister is sick, and so I made everybody dinner and that kind of stuff. And then yeah, like I finally got this window to like sit down and get some art done and work on my comic, which I have to do. I have to jam on these pages because we're aiming for now a September release of this book. So that gives me till basically like January 1st to pretty much knock this thing out and get it done. So we gotta be on crunch time with delivering these pages and getting them knocked out. So my goal during this stream is actually I'm gonna try to do shadows for the page, and then if depending. I might go all the way to doing color, especially because there's only 3 panels on here. So this might be a late night stream. We'll see. But yeah, so like what I'm working on is like the shading of this and stuff. But yeah, it's been a really fun week. It's been just very meaningful week, which is always a weird thing to like kind of talk about. I think in the world, it's a lot easier to kind of harp on negatives. And I'll admit to this too, as a writer, I've written a lot about like kind of depressing subject matter and stuff like that. It's kind of hard as a writer to write about something positive, like to write a really peppy, positive thing. to write that and not have it be generic is a real challenge. I kind of applaud people who can write that kind of thing. I think if you do that, I think maybe comedy would be the next easiest kind of thing, because you can still be a little cynical with comedy. So it's like you can still draw from that kind of well of negativity as a writer. And I do think just like the way we're wired as people, it's way easier to express anger or dismay or sadness than it is to express like joy or like something momentous or moving. I don't know. It's been bizarre. So I don't know. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, I guess. I don't know if that comes across, but yeah. And then I had a previous editor reach out to me who's interested in having me work on a book, another comic. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. I wanted to see what chat thinks about it, because I know that like my next book needs to be 2 stories book 2. Like I did 2 stories book 1 so long ago. And then I kind of put it on hold to do this book just because the opportunity kind of struck to get this done. But this editor is a really cool person. And like, I have a suspicion it'll be a really cool story. And so it's like one of those scenarios of like, I don't know, do I want to bite off another graphic novel that's not my own writing? Because that is kind of a scenario that can easily play out, like where, even this book, like I love this book to death, and I feel like I'm a co-creator of it. Like I've helped a lot with the creation of it and the kind of beat by beat nature of it and like the look of it and stuff like that. So I do feel like I've contributed a lot to this, but I am eager to get back to something that I wrote and created again, and like the idea of like putting that on hold for another book that might take another few years. I don't know how to feel about that. I'm curious. I'd be curious to see what you guys think, but it does seem like a slow night. So I don't know. Maybe everybody's watching the Dodger game. So far, the score is like 7-5 of us playing San Francisco, but I guess we've clinched that we're going to be in the postseason. The problem is like, now it's just kind of like how well our rankings are going to be in said postseason. I'm kind of glad we caught up though. I saw the very beginning of the game and it was pretty brutal. It's been interesting seeing the Dodgers this year because as a new fan of baseball, it's like fun but also frustrating because we have such a good team and we keep having times where we'll like lose games we shouldn't lose. But even saying that, it's funny because that used to be a criticism that I would have when I wasn't a sports person, where I felt like, well, a lot of people like to kind of dissect and analyze how a sports team is doing. And it's kind of like almost like dissecting and analyzing the performance of like a boxer. Whereas like often the people saying this would never be able to step into that ring, It's kind of a similar thing where I feel like I can be critical of the Dodgers, but at the same time, like I would not be able to hold a candle to anyone in any sport, So I don't know, but it's fun. It's entertaining. I met someone else the other day who had worked nights at a gas station, like at school. Actually, they were like a classmate that had also back in the day worked like late nights at a gas station. And I was like, that was a weird job I had when I was, still kind of like just out of high school, and it was just like a job to kind of get by and like pay the rent and stuff at the time. And also to support my way through like, the junior college that I was going to at the time. before I got all my general eds out of the way and could like transfer out of here, which at the time that was like my goal, was like to just get out of this valley. Which is funny. I've met a lot of people who grew up in the valley who still live here now, who like just had that. Some people I actually meet that are my age, and they'll have that same thing where they're like, I just need to leave this valley, like get out of it. Whereas I've changed a lot. I think because my wife and I lived in so many different places, we like love it here. Like this is a beautiful area to live. You know, and with everything that's been going on too in the world, I'm like super happy I live in California. Because some of the kind of more dire stuff going on, it's like, it feels like California might be the last to get hit with some of the negative stuff going on out in the world. And so like I love California and I love where I live, but when I was younger, I like could not wait to leave. It's kind of a typical like young man story. There's this children's book we used to like read to Ben that was about the city mouse and the country mouse or something. And it was like, the gist of it was kind of like the country mouse just like keeps looking at the city mouse as if they have this just like luxurious, amazing life. And so they go on a trip to like kind of go visit their friend, the city mouse. And like the city mouse is just like, okay, so here's where we hide because the cat that like tries to kill us all the time will come by. And it's like, and the country mouse is like, wait, you just live with like a cat that's going to like kill you all the time? And they're just like, yeah, I mean, this is the city, you know, isn't it great? And then they're like, you know, basically like dining on this like great food, but then like they almost get killed like 20 times or something because it's like life in the city kind of thing. And the country mouse eventually kind of is really glad to go home. Like, this is an old children's book. I think it's from like the 50s or 60s. It's really beautifully illustrated. But I think the gist of that's been matches my life path, where I'm pretty glad to not be a city mouse anymore. There is a thrill and a vibrance about like living in a big city, but I really like where I live. I like that I can park places, that I can drive to get groceries and it doesn't take 10 hours, that it's easy to find where people live. Like it's just a much better environment. I like driving here more than I liked driving, you know, downtown and stuff like that. But anyhow, when I was a young man though, I was definitely that like country mouse kind of thing where I really wanted out. And Philip said, "Hey, I remember reading that book in school." Nice. How's it going, Philip? How you been? I liked your live stream, the last one I watched. That was really fun. Were you did you stream again today? I haven't been able to catch up on my YouTube stuff, but it'd be fun to see. But yeah, I definitely feel like that mouse a little bit, like where I really like where I'm at. But it was funny, like bumping into somebody else who had worked nights at a convenience store, you know, because it's like, I think the experience of people who grew up kind of poor is a lot different than the experience of people who grew up really wealthy. And as I've gotten older, I've really tried to like curb that part of me that I think a lot of people who grew up kind of poor have, where I have a bit of a class warrior in my soul. And I have to like, I had to really work on that as I got older, like realizing like people who, you know, grew up with like, with a lot, aren't necessarily bad people, you know? But I remember like, I mean, I will say the life experience, you know, a lot of people I knew that were kind of wealthier. Oh, Philip said I was about to go live in a few minutes. Oh, okay. Well, if you go live, I'm sorry, I'm probably streaming for quite a bit. But yeah, like I feel like the the experience people have like growing up, like I knew people who were kind of better off like when they were teenagers and stuff. Philip was saying I wanted to go live on TikTok, but I decided to go to YouTube. Seems like nobody was on. We seem to overlap. Yeah, we do. It's funny. I've noticed like YouTube kind of feels a little dead tonight too. Maybe it's, again, it could be the Dodger game. I don't know. 7-5 right now is the score. But yeah, like people's life experience is a lot different, I think, when they grow up pretty wealthy or not wealthy, but like middle class kind of thing. Cause it's like, almost everyone I knew, like straight out of high school, not everyone I knew, but a lot of people I knew, like their families would like get them a car, or they were able to kind of like live at home and, you know, like save money and stuff like that. Whereas like my experience was like, I was out of the house at like 18, well, more like 19. And then I had to work like graveyard shifts at like at an AM PM to like pay for, which by the way, for people who aren't familiar with AM PM, it's like pretty much British Petroleum like owns Arco. And so AM PM was like an Arco thing. But anyhow, so like I'd work these crazy shifts like in this like super weird like dangerous neighborhood just to you know pay rent in like a really bad apartment complex that I was splitting with like two other people, you know. But when I was doing that, like you know, there was like a unique experience to it. I was talking to somebody else too, because like at the time I didn't have a car or anything like that, so I would like bike to work. This is like old man talk. I used to walk all day in the snow to get to school, but I'd like bicycle to get to work, and I'd take like public transit everywhere. And in our valley, like public transit to this day is awful. Like the bus system here is so bad. I was talking to a kid who's like probably, well, I'm calling him a kid, but like a young man in his like 20s or something, earlier this week. And they were talking about busing places. And I was realizing, like, I haven't ridden a bus in a long time. Like, I used to ride buses everywhere. And that's like in this area where buses only run like once every hour. And he had missed his bus recently. And I was remembering what that's like, where it's like you like show up to the bus stop to take the bus, and then you're like a minute late, or the bus is a minute early. And then you see this thing just driving away. Philip said, I thought the city country mouse story, they visited each other's homes and each determined they were happy where they lived. I think in the city country mouse, it was specifically about the city mouse kind of comes and visits the country mouse and is like just talking about the glories of the city and how great it is and how there's just like cheese everywhere. And so the country mouse gets really dissatisfied with where she lives and then goes to visit the city mouse and realizes that she's better off. So I think it's mostly from the viewpoint of the country mouse, from what I recall, because we read it recently for Ben. But yeah, I feel like it's a unique experience to like, you know, have to work pretty, you know, to have to work when you're young. And then not just that, but like the kind of weird experiences you gather from like working odd jobs, you know, before you specialize in a trade. I think it's really fleshed out who I am and like helped me appreciate the things that I do have, because, you know, like it's just like knowing what things are like when you don't have, makes you appreciate the things you do. Cause we're not by any means wealthy, but we're, it's still like, I'm not at a point in my life where I have to work nights at an AM PM yet. And even if I do end up there, it's like, well, I've been there before, you know, But what was fun was like, and this is the thing, it's not a complaint that I used to have to do that. It's like, I feel like it's also quite the experience, because I remember getting, like, I'm a person who really likes conversations with people. Like, I like meeting people and learning their stories. It's one of the things I like a lot about Artcasters, is like being able to kind of meet other artists. Oh, Philip said it was also animated. Maybe the animated one took a kind of broader approach to it, Philip, because all I was thinking of was like the little golden book kind of thing. But yeah, the thing that I loved about commuting when I used to like go on buses and stuff was like you would meet like really interesting people, like, and sometimes you'd meet, you know, like complete lunatics, you know, who were like like you kind of wanted to sit a little further away from them, because like they might have been having like an episode or something like that where they were just gonna like wig out and like, you know, hurt someone or something. Like that definitely would happen. But not only that, like you'd also have these times where you'd meet like, you know, like veterans or like people who were retired, and like just people from all kinds of walks in life. And you get in these like fascinating conversations with like different people and hear these different stories like every day, where you're meeting, you know, like 20 or 30 new people, and hearing like 20 or 30 new stories a day, you know. And I'm a talker, so like I'd sit on the bus. I'd try not to be the annoying commuter, you know, who's like, hey, where are you heading, you know. Philip was saying lunatics on public transit. You don't say, LOL. But you know, like I remember meeting like authors and like or like people who were like single moms who like had like 3 jobs and were like lugging their groceries across town, and like just like some incredible people, like people that, you know, you'd cross paths with, and then you'd get to hear their story. And a lot of veterans, especially when I was in Long Beach, commuting to Cal State Long Beach, because like in Long Beach, like the campus is right next to the Veterans Hospital, and so quite often I would meet like these veterans of like wars and stuff who were heading to the hospital and would talk to me about like their experiences, you know, in war and their experiences coming back. And like it's just like this profound thing where you always kind of felt connected with the city and the people who lived in it. And I do think there's like something to be said for that. That's like quite the experience. And that's one thing I actually, even though I would never want to work graveyards at an AM PM again, I do miss the like kind of diverse kinds of people that you would meet on a graveyard shift. Because you'd meet, you know, people who were out heading to a party. You'd meet, you know, people who were definitely up to no good. You would meet people who were just working nights, or like engineers, sheriffs, like just all sorts of like interesting people. And quite often at the time, you know, I smoked cigarettes back then. And this is not something I would ever say people should do. But the one thing I do kind of miss about that was like, it was such a nice way to kind of talk to people. Because like, back in the day, you know, you'd end up with more casual conversations, even waiting for a bus or being at like an AM PM on a night shift, because like somebody would stop by who was a smoker as well, right? And they'd light up and you'd light up, and then you'd just talk, you know, while you're feeding your horrible addiction that took me up until, you know, like I'd say when Ben was born to kick, right? It's a horrible, horrible habit. But the socializing of it was nice. Just kind of having this commonality with somebody who was a complete stranger was always nice for like kind of engaging in conversations and stuff. So anyhow, this younger guy was like talking about that this week, like some weird thing that happened to him on the bus and a conversation he got into, and it just brought back all these memories of like just thousands of conversations throughout the years, you know, when I was a public transit user. And just like how many cool, like weird, diverse conversations you'd have, and how connected you'd feel to where you live. Like the city's like part of your blood, you know, because you're like literally like coming across people from the city all the time. I feel like I think there's something to be said for that. Because like if I think about it, if I had been kind of raised a little bit wealthier and had a car or something like that at that age, and like the money to pay for insurance and all that stuff, I would have I think there's like immediately like a disconnection from reality that might have happened, where, you know, like you haven't seen the best or the worst of people. Like you really just aren't forced to really see people or be around people or share space with, you know, like a good example, like some of the wealthier kids I knew at Cal State Long Beach, like their parents would like pay for like a giant, like these kids would have like an apartment that was like funded by their parents, you know, and they'd be able to like live alone in an apartment, which I wasn't able to do for years, you know, without a roommate, you know. And one of the things that I think is great about having a roommate is like you really quickly learn how to like live with people that can drive you up the wall. Like, you know, especially like when you know, back in the day, I don't know if people realize this, but back in the day, you would look in like a penny saver, to find roommates. Like there was no like, you know, online way to kind of like check out a roommate. And then usually you would try to like find like a safe area to like meet and kind of feel them out, asking questions and stuff. But like the idea of somebody never having to like engage with like a random stranger or live with somebody who's somebody they're less familiar with and learn how to navigate like life with a totally different person, or learn how to like get along in a public commuting situation, or learn how to be patient when like if they miss a bus and like they have to wait a long time and kind of accept where the chips fall, you know. Like I think in a weird way, I almost feel like, you know, while some of that might have been luxurious to avoid, it's like it really does shape who you are and your perception of the world, you know. And you know, I guess I've talked about like determinism on here probably more than you guys like to hear, you know. But it's like just thinking about that, like if my experience was like different, then maybe I wouldn't have the views I have or the empathy for, you know, people around me and stuff, because I've like lived in bad apartment complexes and I've you know, commuted in like shady areas, you know, on public transit and stuff. I've had late nights where you can't make the train, and now I have to like, you have to roam around the city, like looking for like an open restaurant to chill at for like 5 hours till the, you know, the metro runs again, like that kind of stuff, you know? And I kind of think that connection, like, I don't know. I was thinking about this just from that conversation with a friend who's much younger, about public transit, where I was just realizing that, I almost think that's like a really good experience to have, because I think you can feel really disconnected from people. It feels like almost like a historical thing where I feel like the wealthy quite often like live in like gated suburban areas or like really fancy apartment complexes and stuff, where like they're kind of like almost like building moats around their little castles, you know, and rarely are they having to interact with like the common people, you know. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like I do feel like there's a bit of that in the world, and like I think that's just like a disservice to people, like to not have to interact with other people. And keep in mind, I'm an extrovert. I look like an extrovert, you know, but it's funny. It's like, so my wife is an introvert for sure. Like she doesn't seek out going to like public places at all.
I on paper would be an extrovert because I like going to like things like, you know, if people are having a meetup, I like to like try to participate and stuff like that. But the funny thing is, between my wife and I, like my wife will go to like an event or like a meetup with friends or something like that, have a good time, and then just like be cool with it. Whereas like I will overthink it if I hang out with people and like almost like have less of a good time because I'm like, I think partially because I'm not good at reading people. And so it's like social situations are very like hairy and depressing for me, even though I will seek them out more often than she will. And it's funny. I think part of that might be just, you know, being slightly autistic, right? Where I have trouble reading like subtle cues and stuff like that. And also, if I wanted to, I could literally spend like months just working on a comic and like never go out. Like I could stay holed up and probably be fine. Which is interesting. Philip said that happened to me once. I took the wrong train, but it was so late they stopped running to go home. I hung out at Tim Hortons all night. But you know what's funny is like I have a lot of good memories from those times. Like the metro thing that I remember, I took the metro to LA with a friend. We both went, and then we got to the train station too late. So like, you know, and you know this when you get to like the metro and it's too late because like all the shutters are down, you know, like it's like you can't even enter. And so I think we found like a donut shop in like Los Angeles that was open, and we just hung out eating donuts. Which was horrible because we both had to work the next day, but it was also a funny memory and like a fond, like I look back at that fondly. Like I don't think back at that night like, oh, what a horrible thing that happened. It was kind of fun in retrospect, you know, it was an adventure. And again, I think even the person who worked there was like cracking up. Like, I think we talked to them about like our situation, and they were like hooking us up with like free donuts and stuff, like, because we were broke, you know? I don't know, you know, like life can be really interesting. Hey, look at that. The Dodgers won. That's good. We're back at it, guys. Philip said, I was by myself and a creepy homeless woman kept hitting on me. I had to leave. Yeah, that happens too. You know, I definitely remember a couple times where you get off the bus and be followed by, you know, a group of people that probably weren't intending good things. There's definitely things I do not miss about public transit. I mean, if I missed it so much, I'd probably be using it all the time. But I feel like those are good. That I guess my point is, I just think it's good to stay connected to reality and stay connected to the people in your city or people in general. I think something dangerous happens when we hole ourselves up in little castles with moats like surrounding us, where you get kind of disconnected from reality or like the people around you, and it's easier to kind of like demonize other people. I think when you do that, it's easier to kind of think the worst of people if you aren't around people. And I will tell you, when you're around people, you will see the worst, but you'll also see a lot of good, you know? Yeah, I don't know. You know, I think a lot of people who have like kind of fear of diversity or something like, or fear of like, you know, like people who fear immigrants, that kind of stuff. Like, I think a lot of those people probably just haven't lived next to immigrants. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like, because in Long Beach, like we had a neighbor that I still think of really fondly. He was a really good dude. He was working like 3 jobs to like cover his family. And, you know, he was a new immigrant to America, and like, he was like the hardest working guy I ever met, you know, and like really sweet, spent a lot of time with his kids. And I still to this day have no idea how that guy held it down, because he was like I said, he was working like 3 jobs and still managing to spend like really quality time with his kids and stuff. It's like, I don't know. I think like just things like that, like, you know, people, so anyhow, on the deterministic front, it's like, if you don't have those experiences, you know, and all you're doing is living in, you know, wealthy suburbs and like never really experiencing the world or like a connection to your city, it's like, of course people start getting kind of disconnected from reality and inventing like weird conspiracy theories, or starting to think of like their fellow human beings as like horrible, you know. And I don't know, I feel like it's good to, I guess in a weird way, I'm just saying it might be good to not be raised super wealthy, you know. It might be a good thing for people. But I mean, I also say that understanding, it's like even now in life, like a lot of, you know, like finances are a struggle, you know. They always have been. From the looks of it, they will be for quite a bit. You know, I don't know if I'm ever going to be in a position in my life where, like, you know, I want for nothing, you know. But I was even thinking about that the other day. Like, I think I mentioned this on stream before. But like I don't know if I'd be a good rich person. Like, because like there's all these like ancient rare books that would be fun to own, and like I love guitars, so like would I just buy a bunch of stupid guitars that I can't afford? Like, what would, you know, I feel like there's it might be a good thing that I'm not like crazy wealthy, you know. I think I'd handle it better now than I would as a young man. But I think if I was younger, you know, and you just have like kind of like the world handed to you, like, I don't know, I feel like that can be kind of a negative as well. But anyhow, like it's just stuff I've been thinking about. I had just realized like I hadn't thought about public transit in years, you know. And it just brought me back to like, you know, 20 plus years of experience like riding public transit everywhere, you know, and like the highs and lows of it. I don't know if this has ever been done in a story. I always thought it would be cool to have a story that literally like somebody gets on a bus, right? And then they start having a conversation with another person. Has this been done? Let me know if this has been done. And then when that other person leaves the bus, instead of following our main character that we were introduced to, it follows that person, right? And you just have this like kind of trading story that just follows people throughout a city. It has to have been done. But I always thought that would be cool, using like public transit as a as kind of like a format to like kind of switch characters. I always thought that would be really interesting. So at the end of it, like your main character would be the public transit, not the people. Like the thing connecting everybody would be like a bus. So you could follow this bus, or you could do it with a, you know, with like a metro station or like the L or something like that, where you're kind of following all these different disparate people. You almost would think of it as like, you know, like a movie that does like a single shot, you know, where it's like, it's just the camera's like constantly moving. The only catch is like, how do you get back to the bus? I guess maybe you see that person's like a little short story of them before they get back on the bus. And then like, I don't know. I just think that would be a really cool thing if it hasn't been done. I think that could be a really interesting framing for like a slice of life story. It could be over the top and horrible too. So, all right, guys, we're getting there. I'm not a fan of how this is playing out with the shading. No, you know what? I think it works. I think I need to tone back the shading on her hair up here because it's like starting to look like almost like spaghetti noodles. Spaghetti. A spiral jetty. Yeah, I still think that needs to be done at some point. Like a story that, you know, is framed by like a public transit, like a bus or something. But again, it like follows all these interconnected lives. I know there's always been like butterfly effect type stories, so I guess it's not the most unique idea. But I always like that kind of idea of a butterfly effect story. I don't know how often it's been really effectively done. Where you have like a story that's about all the different impacts of different people, you know. It kind of feels like a almost like Herculean task or whatever, where you know, like to try to tell a story that's like let's capture everyone, you know, from the city. Canterbury Tales on a bus. Exactly. I think it would be cool. I think it would be really cool. How's it going, Thomas? What are you working on? How are things treating you, my dude? Maybe an idea for a future comic. Yeah, it was an idea a long time ago for one. It's in the back pocket of ones I'd like to do. Because I think it could be pretty cool. You could do it on like an old, you know, 50s style bus or something. Like the bus itself could have kind of a personality to it. I'm curious your guys' opinion on this. So I got approached by one of my old editors who's amazing. They're like literally one of the best. Oh, nice. Thomas said I had to work today, so just relaxing right now. Yes, sir. I understand that. Yeah, I think it was about, oh, cool. I can see about an hour ago that I finally got a window to work on my comics. Because I was just homeworking and taking care of sick people today. It is fascinating when you as a parent. I think I used to make a joke about that on this stream where people always go as a parent, as if that like makes them like an authority of some kind. So I think we used to do as a handsome man, like, well, as a handsome fellow, as a handsome man. Anyhow, as a parent, it is kind of weird though when one person gets sick, it just travels through the house. So it's like Ben got sick, my wife got sick, my sister-in-law got sick, so we're all sick except me. And so it was kind of the onus was on me to like feed everybody and but other than that, like we did, I just did homework most of the day. Yeah, I think that could be cool, the bus story. So I want to know your guys' opinion on this, though. Like, so I have an editor. She's amazing. Old editor from a different book. Who kind of approached me a couple days ago and was saying, like, how's the book coming? Are you going to be free? Because I have, like, a book that would be perfect for you to do in like black and white graphic novel, and was like asking about my availability. And keep in mind, this is the best editor I have ever worked with in my life, and I firmly believe in everything that they publish. So I don't know what to do with that, because like, should I because like this book kind of came about like that, where my writer's rep basically had gotten interest from a bunch of publishers in if I did anything other than, you know, basically like autobio type stuff, because they just liked the art a lot. And so we pitched this just as like a Hail Mary. My sister and I pitched this script, and then it got picked up. So because of that, I've had to put off 2 Stories book 2 for like this entire time. And I had a lot of progress on that book. So 2 Stories book 2 is like, it's written, it's fully roughed out. It's just a matter of doing the pages. But that'll probably take like a year or 2 to do, right? Just to execute the final pages. And now it's like I'm almost done with this, and this is another project written by another person that I could like illustrate. I think it would pay a page rate too. But it's like, should I do it, or should I just be like, I can't because I'm going to do my book, like book 2. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. Because like I said, it's not like we're super wealthy, like, you know, and so if it was like a page rate and it was a decent book, like, I don't know. And it's an editor that I really like. It's so like, I know, like, it almost sounds like a first world problem kind of thing. But I'm a little torn about it. I'm like, do I take on another book written by someone else? Because I'm like really aching to get back to like my own vision, like my own full vision of a story, even though I love this book. Like, this book is amazing, and I do feel like I'm kind of a collaborator in making it, like a co-creator kind of thing. But I still like ache to get back to my little like fully personal stories, you know? Dylan's here. How's it going, Dylan? Philip said, we were looking for the bus stop, but in the end, we learned that we are all the bus stop. I just think it could have like a real cool, like existential vibe to it, you know? Because there's definitely like those moments in life. Like, have you ever had those moments in life where you're like at a restaurant or something and you start realizing like everybody's got a story, you know? Everybody's got a struggle. Everybody's got some weird, interesting, crazy drama going on, you know? And you just get these little windows or snippets of it. And how fun would it be to just follow, like, as a reader, like follow all those characters on one bus, you know, or all those characters in one restaurant. But again, that's a real big undertaking. So I feel like my chops as a writer would have to get improved quite significantly. Dylan said, I'm doing okay. I was going to go to bed, but now that you're on, I'll stay up. Oh, well, you don't have to stay up, but I do appreciate the company if you do. I do think that would be a really hard undertaking, though, because it would be kind of, I guess the thing that I think of with it would be something like Magnolia. Have you ever seen Magnolia? I think that story kind of follows a bunch of disparate characters, and they all kind of connect in an interesting way, but just kind of framed around like a bus. Philip said, I was going to try to go live in about 5 to 10 minutes. Nice. It's what we call Sonder, Joshua, to realize that everyone has their own lives. Yeah. And I've had like those moments a lot, you know, but it's like, I remember back when I would commute, like I was saying this earlier in the stream, but I was talking about kind of memories of when I used to ride the bus, how you would feel connected to the city, like much more connected to the city, because you'd meet people and hear their like disparate stories and stuff, and it was really fascinating. I think that's when that came about as an idea. It was kind of like, how cool would it be to like follow everybody in a story, you know? For the opportunity, how cool is the story, and would doing it open more doors and opportunities? Well, that's the problem, is doing it would probably open more doors and opportunities for sure. But those doors and opportunities would likely be drawing somebody else's comic again. You know, like that's the thing. And I'm not sure if I want to get into that again. I don't know, you know. Because there's something really beautiful about doing your own, you know. I don't know if that makes sense. But yes, this person, I'm guessing. I mean, I guess at least I'll probably view the script and see how good it is. I'll probably just check out the script and see how good it is. Because even with this book, I feel really good about being connected to it because it's a really good story. And I always kind of feel like good things to connect with are things you feel should exist in the world and aren't out there yet. Like, I think that's a good feeling to get as a creative, is like feeling in your gut, like, why isn't this out there? Why isn't anyone doing this? You know? Two Stories book 1 was like that, and book 2 is like that. It needs to be out there. So the idea of putting that on the shelf for another, 4 years or something is like a little depressing, because I don't think I'd want to put it on the shelf for another 4 years. So we'll see what comes up. Dylan said, I have those moments a lot too. Like the other day I was thinking about my parents and how they had their own thoughts, feels, history before me, and history before they met. That hit home for me a lot when my dad passed. Like when my father passed, I remember one of the hardest things for me was realizing I'd never have the ability to like ask him. Like throughout the years, I've had like questions come up in my head about certain events of it in his life that I didn't connect with when I was younger. And even when my dad was alive, like he was a graphic designer back in the day, and we never got to have that like that one-on-one conversation about like working with clients or like invoicing or like just shop talk. Like I feel like we never really got to have that. And yeah, like every once in a while that is tough when you start thinking about like all of that, especially when they've passed, because it's like you don't get to have those convos again. And so thoughts will just pop up where you're like, man, I wanted to ask about this thing. And you realize like, wait, I'm never going to be able to ask that, But yeah, I still have moments like that with my mom too. And she's alive and well, but it's like, I'll like forget to ask her stuff, like curious stuff about her life, I remember my grandpa. There's a weird one about my grandpa. It's a really fond memory I have. Because like my grandpa didn't talk a lot about himself. He was more of a guy who'd talk a lot about other people. And like, it was like the last year of his life. I remember him having this like vivid moment. Like he was like at this point he was pretty. I don't know if it makes sense, but it's like his last year he was like a little senile. Like, so he wasn't like thinking clearly all the time. But he had this moment where he just like vividly started describing. Like this was like crazy pretty story that he told, but he said like he was saying he was with Elsie, who's my grandma, and with my mom, and they were on a boat in the Midwest, like in the forest. Like there was this like stream that went through the forest, and that they were on this boat, and that he looked over at my mom, because my mom was a little girl at the time, and just at that moment, like when he looked over at her, like all these flower petals just started like falling on them like rain. And I thought he was like maybe just like tripping out and like seeing stuff, you know, because like I said, at this point he was pretty senile. So I mentioned that to my mom, and then my mom had like a quiet moment of just like totally remembering where they were. You know, it turns out they were like visiting a friend who had lived off of that lake in the Midwest. And she remembered the exact same thing, that it started like raining flower petals. And it was like really meaningful for her too, because it was like, you know, it was a time where we weren't really connecting with him as much because he just wasn't as there as he used to be. But it was just like this beautiful thing that like out of nowhere I heard that story, you know. And it took me up until I was like, yeah, it was like that last year where I really found out a lot about him. Like he had hitchhiked. Like, this is a crazy story. During the Great Depression, he was out of work, and my mom and grandma, like, you know, needed a place to live and food. And so what he did was like he hitchhiked all the way from like Indiana to like California. Like he hitchhiked there, and like on his way, like, so he'd hop a train and then he'd head to like a couple states down, and then he'd get some work at a farm, like just helping out like at a farm, and then he'd like, you know, work for a couple weeks, save up some money, hop on another train, did this all the way till he got to California. And then finally, you know, after months of being, you know, like working as a day laborer, got a job in California, and then basically flew my mom and his wife like back to California. And that was like a crazy story where I barely got any of those stories, you know. Philip said, I go through that all the time. Things I wish I could have asked my parents. But it's kind of weird. It's like that. I think it's like that for everyone, where there's just like, there's like interesting questions that we just don't think to ask other people, you know? Because we're all kind of stuck in these little boxes up here. Like, you know, we've got our own little viewfinders and our own struggles, and life is hard too. So it's like, you know, the pace of things rarely like slows down enough to like really be able to like think about like others as much as we should. That's why I do think it's healthy to like have times where you connect to the city, you know. But yeah, I've always thought it might be a good idea to like make a list of questions to ask my mom, like, you know, while she's still here. There's just all sorts of fascinating stories. And then the tough part is, right, if you add on top of that our own memories are pretty unreliable. And then the older we get, our memories become less and less reliable. So it's like, that's tough too. That makes it like pretty hard too, because it takes me a while sometimes to like figure out like what years, like even writing 2 stories, which I wrote quite a while ago. It took me talking to a lot of people that knew me at the time to like try to be as accurate as possible with it, because events in it like really started blurring into like single events would blur into like different days, or like I would think something happened like a year before it did. And like, you really like, memory is really weird. You know, because we're all kind of constructing a story to kind of make sense of things. And sometimes that story just gets jumbled because of time, you know? So it's like, to me, the writing an autobiography was really like, an autobiographical story was like, challenging because of that. Because I was surprised how challenging it is to like vividly remember everything perfectly. Like, it took me a long time and talking to a lot of people to try to give a really honest portrayal, because my first draft was like pretty accurate, but like some things were just like days were mixed to a different year, or like orders of events had like shifted. Dylan was saying his dad talked to him hardly ever about his life, but sometimes when he was in the hospital, he would talk for a few hours, which is rare. Kind of like mice and men. Yeah. And he said, I think that everyone almost everyone thinks that, having questions about their parents. Dylan said, I have a small bookshelf of my mom's court cases she worked on, so it'd be cool to know the cases she worked on. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and you kind of wonder, I mean, man, like a lawyer must have so many interesting stories, you know? Yeah, it's I just like to me, this is a defense of why we should be making art, right? Is like everyone's carrying around stories, you know? Like every human being is carrying around stories. We should tell them, you know? Like, wouldn't it be a shame if, like, I don't know. That's one reason I think we should be working on stories. Because, like, yeah, we can leave behind some cool stuff that, you know, a unique story that hasn't been told before. Or those stories can just pass with us, you know? And it's like, I think that's why we need to make art, you know? Make art so you can tell your stories. That's why I'm wondering about the stuff with this editor, because I'm like, you know, depending, is it a story that I want to tell? And is it worth putting off the story that I feel like I really need to tell? It's you know, or is there a way I'd be able to juggle both? I don't know, you know? Thomas was saying my dad loved to talk, so I got his stories whether I wanted to or not. Yeah, I mean, my dad was a talker, and I got a lot of stories from him, but it did surprise me. You know, every once in a while, there will be a year where I just kind of would like to be able to, like, have a conversation about stuff. Because, you know, you get older, you experience new things, and then you realize, like, as you're doing that, like, your parents probably experienced a similar thing, you know, and that's where it's like it's a little rough, because you're like, man, it'd be cool to ask them about this thing, you know. Yeah, sorry, not trying to like drag us into sadness, guys. but it's interesting, and I think it is, like, I don't know, I think stories are worth telling. Dylan said the only case I know was the Norco 80 bank robbery. Wow. That's crazy. I feel like we don't hear about bank robberies a lot anymore. Maybe it's because there's just so much toxicity out there that, like, a bank robbery is just like, yeah, well, whatever, you know? I don't know. But I feel like I haven't heard a good bank robbery story in a while. There is something, like, strangely addictive, like, about a bank robbery story or a car chase on the news. I feel like both of those things are just, like, instant, like, interest if they come up. Dylan said, I think the topic is bittersweet and cerebral. I like it. Yeah. I like it too, because I think it does kind of touch on some of the existential questions that I think artists should be asking themselves. You know, a lot of people, when they're making these things, when we're working on things like this, we'll forget why we're doing it sometimes. And I think that gets into one of those big existential reasons to make art. It's like, otherwise the stories can die, you know? And, like, we need stories. Like, we need stories so we don't repeat stupid mistakes. Like, it's part of why the story of history is really important for people to remember. We need stories to kind of like empathize with other people, to help us process this crazy thing that's existence, you know? To entertain us, like all that kind of stuff, you know? To help us process crazy things, or like help us be brave, you know? Heck, to even make smart decisions. If I had listened to the City Mouse and Country Mouse, I might have gotten where we are earlier. Maybe I wouldn't have had to, you know, make the mistakes I made to like get to the point where I realized, yeah, I probably don't want to live in the city. Dylan said, same. I looked into it a few years ago to see if they still happen, because I literally haven't heard of a bank robbery. They still happen, obviously. Yeah. No, they happen. They just aren't like, I think those used to be big news. But then now that I think about it, it might be different because, yeah, there we go. Thomas just beat me to the punch. I think it might be different because back in the day, like even when I was a kid, they used to have those like tubes. Like I don't know if this is gonna ring a bell for any of you guys, or maybe I'm just way too old, but back in the day, like if my mom deposited a check, like there was a drive-through place to deposit it, right? But it was like these little containers that you'd like put your check in, and then you'd put it in the container, and then this tube would like suck the container and put it into the bank. You know, that was like modern technology at the time for like bank deposits, which was cool as a kid, because then when the tube came back, it would have the money, and it would have like a balloon usually, or something for the kids in the car, you know, like a lollipop or something. This is weird that this used to exist. Do you guys remember those? The tubes, the vacuum tubes or whatever. Anyhow, but most of the time, if you were going to deposit something in the bank, you'd actually go to the bank, like quite often. And I think banks, like, I think their hours are shorter now. I don't think people go to a physical bank very often anymore. So that's probably it, where it's like, you know, because if somebody's desperate enough to like rob a bank or something, a lot of the time they're not like planning this out. Like a lot of the time it's a thought that crosses their mind, and it probably crosses their mind when they're at the physical bank. Like they're like, oh, I could rob this place. You know what I mean? Whereas like people are rarely at physical banks. It's like you almost forget they exist, you know, unless you have to go into like, you know, like maybe you're traveling abroad and you have to like exchange currency for like whatever country you're traveling to. But aside from that, like you're rarely actually going into a bank anymore. So I bet that's it, Dylan. Or not Dylan, Thomas. Dylan said movies make it seem like they happen all the time and shared on the news. It's like millennials with quicksand. Back in my day, Dylan said they still have them. Do they really still have like the vacuum tube things? I remember like one of my other odd jobs when I was younger was a movie theater. And the movie theater had a vacuum tube system. So when you closed out, like, because I worked concession, and then sometimes you'd have to cover like the ticket stand. And it's like if you work concession or ticket stand, when you closed out your register, you'd put it all in this envelope, like a zip envelope. And then you would put it in one of those vacuum tube things. And then, you know, you'd basically press a button to like send it upstairs to like the manager. It's like, that was pretty cool too. But I don't know if I've ever seen those. Yeah, Philip was saying now it's like, yeah, most of us don't even use machines. I remember it was a couple years back. I'm such an old person that I think it was my wife who found out that you can just deposit checks using your phone. And I was like, what? Yeah, see, Thomas remembers the vacuums. Get lollipops. And back then, you know, the teller would like talk to him, you know, there would be like this, you know, one of those big like metal mic things, you know, that like they'd kind of talk to you. It was very much like fast food at the time. But yeah, I feel like the argument for making stories is that where it's like we don't know how long our memory of our stories will last, you know? And then so it's like even preserving our own memories or our own stories is like a rarity, you know? So like writing stories that we want to write, like now's the time, you know? Much less like finding out someone else's story. That's one of the fun things about this historical fiction thing is like this story is kind of completely lost in pop culture about Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and these poets are still taught in like colleges and stuff, and there've been movies about their romance and all this stuff. Like they're very famous people. However, like this story's just not been told, and that's crazy because it's there in her letters. Like, and so it's like it to me. That's one of the fun parts about this story about the Brownings is the fact that we're kind of unearthing a story that happened. Like it's a thing that happened. The only fictional elements of this are really just to fill in the blanks of like things we weren't sure of. But this whole thing, the events, the characters, like all of it, like actually happened. So it's kind of like the reverse of what I was talking about, where it's like about stories getting forgotten. It's like, well, this is a story that definitely got forgotten because like hardly anyone knows it except, you know, maybe a few researchers who've poured through every single one of the Browning's letters. And so, and there has definitely not been a story about it yet. So like, that's pretty cool to me. Yeah. Dylan said, before my dad died, I had to withdraw money from his bank account, but I had to walk to the drive-thru to use their ATM. Interesting. Dylan said, sounds cool, and that's sad they didn't tell this story. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's like, it's kind of weird, but also really exciting because we get to be the kind of the nerds that bring this thing out in the light, you know? If I ever finish it. That would be another important part, is getting it done. Okay, I'm probably going to play a video real quick. I was going the wrong way with that. We're going to go from the bottom to the top for light to dark. Thomas said the last time he was at a bank was to replace a broken debit card. That's funny because I have a broken debit card right now. So at some point I might need to do the same because it started like splitting. Am I crazy? Does it feel like debit cards are made like cheaper than they used to be? I feel like the latest debit cards are not as sturdy as they used to be. All right, guys, I'm going to merge visible. And then I'm going to play a trailer, and then I will be coloring this page. So if you guys are working on stuff, stay with me and hang out, work on stuff while I do this. All right, let me put on a trailer. Let's find one. You know what? I've been doing the Kemble files a lot, and I feel like Frank has not gotten a lot of love lately, so I'm going to put on Frank's Adventures at the Library. We haven't seen this one in a while. I'll be right back. Oh, I have to actually do this.
Our heroic adventurers fought orcs, monsters, sorcerers, necromancers. Now they find themselves in front of a mystical library. What shall they find? It's all in the roll of the dice.
We've come this far. There's great power behind this door. I can feel it. We just have to get past it. This door is no match for my axe. I shall chop it down. You always want to use brute strength. Why don't you try knocking? We'll try it your way. You may enter. The library is open to all those who seek knowledge. Feel free to look through our tomes. Maybe you'll find the answers you seek. I sense great power here, and it's behind those shelves. Indeed, there are powerful items hidden behind these shelves, but you can only get there through the enchanted words. Do you have those words? I believe I do.
Tremble before the Kemble.
There is great power. Look at that glove. Must be so powerful. That is not where I sense this power. I must get closer. I found them. I found these sacred manuscripts written by Joshua Kemble. Behold, I now possess 2 stories and Jacob's apartment. Please tell us more about 2 stories and Jacob's apartment, and who is Joshua Kemble? Xeric Award-winning cartoonist Joshua Kemble is a freelance artist, graphic designer, and author. 2 Stories is a confessional graphic memoir that grapples with questions of faith, mental illness, depravity, and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. Jacob's Apartment is a coming-of-age graphic novel in the vein of Ghost Road and Fun Home. It weaves together the threads of spiritual faith, identity, purpose, love, and loss to create an engrossing world in which waking and sleeping dreams collide. You have made your choice. The passage is now closed. Wait, can I get that glove? No. Oh. All right, let's go.
I just realized that I was on mute. All right, so what we're doing is working on page 165 of Not Death But Love, The Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We're rocking through it. Dylan said there's a viewer in the chat of a YouTube show of Tyler Crook's live stream that interviews indie creators. And Dylan said they gave her a list, including me, Scott, Corey, Gary, and Jeremy and David Hartman. Nice. That's awesome. That's cool. Thank you for the heads up. Yeah, so we're working on color now on the page. This shouldn't take too long, but again, if you guys are longtime viewers of this channel, you'll know that quite often I'll say this shouldn't take too long, and it takes way too long. So we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. But hopefully it won't take too long. Yeah, because here it's like a much simpler, kind of more focused on people And so really all I have to do is kind of all the color of all these different spots. So let's see if this works. It's easier to just pull my phone out of my pocket, tap on the app, and tap on the device. Oh, Philip was talking about for deposits. Yeah, for sure. Or just for payment. Yeah, I haven't used... I'm very old school with stuff. I'm a very slow adopter to anything. So, like... I probably should use stuff like Apple Pay or Venmo more, but I'll like forget. And so I still use my debit card quite a bit. But again, I'm like a slow adopter. Like I tend to... I think my soul is older than even I am, where I tend to like older things, and it might be the kind of slightly autistic part of me too that likes routines. I don't know, but let's see. Color. But yeah, like for me, I still haven't quite gotten the hang of like Apple Pay that much. Dylan said, no problem, since I can't support you guys monetarily, I try to find other ways to support. Well, hey, just even hanging out and like, you know, participating in chats and stuff. That's great. It makes a world of difference. Okay. So now that we have this, oh, cool. I don't ever have to draw her hair, but I do have to, oh, you know what we can do? Let's do the hair, the flower here. I can definitely feel myself getting a little tired. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but like quite often when I'm streaming, if I start feeling a little tired, I'll kind of have moments of like, well, I like almost like freezing up on where I was going. I definitely have moments like that sometimes as I'm going. But I think we're going to be able to get some good progress going here. Because it's really just getting these characters, you know? Let's do the lips. Dylan said, I'm really awkward with sliding my card. It takes a few times. I'm glad the tap pay or insert is a good thing. That is definitely something. The insert, like the tap pay, like never works for me for some reason. I feel like every time I try it, the machines are out or my cards are not working or something like that. But I do like the insert. The insert seems like the most efficient way forward. So now we're going to do the hair here. And we're just kind of building this out. I will say I've been really digging this OBS direct to stream thing. It's so fluid and easy. Just digging it quite a bit. I had somebody at the college that I'm going to was kind of snarky to me for some reason. I don't know why. They were just being kind of like weird and demeaning. I don't know. Somehow they were it was kind of like a, well, what do you do kind of thing. And I mentioned that I'm working on a graphic novel and they were like, what's a graphic novel? It was like the most pretentious, like, it was a weird moment. I haven't had a moment like that outside of academia. Like, I remember getting that when I was working on my BFA, where like this is like years, like 20 something years ago, you know, I remember having to defend comics, you know, to some kind of people who were not really familiar with comics and what they can do. Why is this like having troubleshoot mode? Something just popped up. Hold on. I don't want to open troubleshoot mode. I'm going to close that up. But yeah, so like anyhow, like I remember when I was working on my BFA, like I was working on my bachelor's, and that you would occasionally bump into like these snooty fine art majors who'd be like, you know, basically making the argument that comics aren't art and would be kind of demeaning and stuff about it. But in the real world, I really haven't bumped into that. Like, I haven't really experienced that in years. So it was so funny to have somebody pull that like this many years later, where they were like, what are graphic novels? And then when I mentioned it was comics, they're like, oh, I don't do comics. And I'm like, well, that's great. I don't care. Like, you're good for you. It was just funny. It was like the most snotty, like weird thing. And I remember that from academia, that like that doesn't really exist outside of like weird like 1%er art galleries. That kind of pretension about like art versus art, you know, like it just doesn't exist. Like, and it's hilarious because I remember being told that by like teachers at the time who were like more right-minded about it, where they were like, this kind of snobbery about like art with a capital A, it just kind of doesn't exist like outside of the academic setting. But it was so funny because it's like, oh my gosh, I hadn't experienced that in years. It it used to make me really mad, but this time it just kind of cracked me up because I was like, wow, well, what have you done, lady? Like, I don't know. It was just funny to me because I was like, what are you in like? I don't know. It just cracked me up. It made me more curious what that person's like art with a capital A is and what they've achieved in their career. Like, I don't know. It was funny to me. Cause like you're gonna occasionally, and by the way, it's not like she was saying what is a graphic novel. Like, honestly, it's like the way she was asking it was like really pretentious. And then when I answered what it was, she was like, oh, well, I prefer art, kind of thing. It was so funny. It was kind of adorable. Like, I was like, oh, you guys still exist. I just thought it was funny that still exists out there. That somewhere, you know, somebody who's doing like local art shows, you know, they're doing like gallery shows for like, you know, like maybe paintings of like landscapes, like desert landscapes that like 3 people have seen. And they're like, ooh, I'm making the real art. Not comics. We make art here. And I was like, I don't know. Anyhow, it was funny. I have not experienced that in years, but it was very funny to me. Have you guys ever had somebody act like really snotty about you making comics or being interested in comics? They're like, I like real books. It's so funny to me. I just didn't realize. I guess I've been pampered because I've been surrounded by like people like you guys and, you know, the Artcasters community and stuff, where it's just like, it's no question what a comic is or like what the validity of comics are. It's like, nobody's debating whether these things are art or not in my circles. And so like, it was funny to kind of see, because again, it reminded me like, oh yeah, when I was younger, that was like a whole thing, like where people just completely dismissed that as an art form. Those funny papers. Dylan said to Joshua, to that woman, oh, you cryptid you. No, I just kind of felt curious, like I really do want to see that person's art. Like I want to do a life drawing next to that person and see how good their chops are. Like, you know what I mean? It just makes me want to see what is so special about this person. Thomas said, having dabbled in drawing, I think sequential art is much harder than one-offs. Oh, 100%. And actually, the thing is, I'm pretty good at one-offs, and I'm pretty good at painting, and pretty good at all the fine art stuff too. So like, I'm not the best at it, but it's like I was wondering, like, is this person like making like this like stunning artwork? I'm like, what was the last book this lady published? I don't know. I don't like that's where my class warrior comes out, is if somebody's like snarky, and I know, like, I'm kind of, partially because I'm autistic, I'll sound kind of snarky. Like, I have a tone, like I can sound a little pretentious. But in reality, like, I tend to think, like, things are cool, man. Like, things people do are cool. I get fascinated by what other artists do, I'm not even like, I really personally like graphic novels that are trying to be literature, but I also really like lowbrow, like crazy, like horror, like, cape and tight books and stuff like that. It's like, I like all this stuff. And there's nothing that like brings out like the class warrior in me than like somebody being kind of like a snobby, pretentious prick, like it's. But it was just I don't know. To me, it was just funny because I just hadn't experienced that in years. Where I was like, really? Okay. Interesting. I don't dabble in comics. But it did bring me back a bit, because I forgot that like in academia, there's still that wing of people who like think comics aren't a valid art form. They're a dying breed, but they still are out there, like, yeah. But I think they're a minority now. Like, I think most people at this point have pretty much accepted that comics are an art form, but I could be like totally having cognitive bias there. Dylan was saying, my brain at the moment can't really do one-offs. So the only things I can do are sequential or practice. Huh. The thing I'd struggle with, though, is like I can do one-off illustrations or paintings or stuff like that, like portraits, that kind of stuff. But like there's no way I could do well doing one-panel strips. Like, to me, like, the cleverest of people are the people doing one-panel strips. I feel like for somebody like me who's really long-winded, that's like an ultimate, like, scary thing to like. I don't know. One-panel strips like really intimidate me a lot. It's funny. There's a mutual friend of like mine and Jim Luhan's, Lonnie Millsap. We've had him on Artcasters too, and he just blows my mind. Like the wealth of like one-panel strips this guy can generate. It's like, I don't know how he doesn't run out of ideas. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely think that only really exists in a really small subsect of like I said, like a 1% gallery, like the Art Basel kind of scene, that kind of thing. I could see them there being like, comics aren't art, I could definitely see that. Because, they're looking for, art that'll basically like be a nice way to store value, like a stock, like, and then academia. Like, those are kind of the two realms where that exists. And I think academia, for the most part, is really valuable, but there are some times where like pretension just is like wild and very unjustified. It's almost like a person being like, rock and roll, I only listen to classical music. Like I don't know, it just cracked me up. Yeah, but that was funny. I just hadn't experienced that in quite a while. All right, we're getting there. Dylan said, I think my brain might be too tired to do a one-off. Like, it needs to just practice or might have a story that's sequential. Yeah, I can understand that. My brain is definitely too tired to do a one-off comic strip. You know? It is funny, though. Like, I do remember when I was working on my master's, there is like a world of art theory and like kind of pomposity within like the art world, like that I don't know, maybe it doesn't exist anymore, but I feel like there still is like a pompous thing that happens in some of the arts. And some of it with reason, right? Some of it is like great stuff and it's just unrecognized by, you know, most people, but then some of it is just straight up like academic pretension. Yeah, Philip was saying I'd ask her if she used comic pages as napkins when eating her gray poupon. Yeah. Well, to me, it was just funny because, like, again, I don't know. I'd just be really curious. Like, I really want to see that person's art now. Like, that's my main thing is like, I want to see her art. Because if she was like a really good artist and then thought that, I might be like, But I have a suspicion it's like, you know, like Art School Confidential type stuff. Like, because for those of you who aren't familiar with how Art School used to view comics, read the original Art School Confidential by Daniel Klaus. Because that was like, almost like that thing used to float around on campus. Like, I think a teacher that I knew, was a younger teacher, like handed it to me when I was experiencing some of that pretension about comics. And it was like, it was just the funniest story ever. It's like a legitimate, just amazing story. Just kind of making fun of art school. But like, anyhow, in that comic, like there's this person who's like critiquing Daniel Klaus's work, a young Daniel Klaus who's like in art school, about how like he's not really making his work like reflect, you know, the human condition and all this pretentious stuff. And then it shows like what her art project is, and it's like a tampon in a teacup. And she's like, this is reflecting like women's issues and like going through a whole thing. It's such a good comic strip. The movie I haven't seen. I think I saw it once and it was interesting, but like I felt like they were really stretching it to fill a script of like an entire movie. I guess I'd have to see it again, but I feel like the comic itself, it's just a short, like 10-page or so comic. And that comic itself is just like the funniest thing about art school from that era. Because it'd be like a teacher critiquing his comics, and then it would be like, it's an illustrator who like illustrates like part manuals for like auto manufacturers. And like all of that stuff was great. It was the best. But anyhow, yeah. I was just kind of surprised that it still exists. Like, I was like, really? That's still out there, huh? Yeah. But I think at its best, like, art should be, you know, all kinds of stuff. You got to have classical music. You got to have, you know, ragtime. You got to have hip hop. You got to have jazz. You got to have rock. You got to have it all, you know, everything except modern country, you know. And I feel like that would be the best world to live in, you know? It's all good. Everything but modern country is amazing. I have one thing I just can't do, which is, and it's not like, I'm sure there's like some modern like roots country kind of stuff that I'd probably dig, but like modern like kind of pop country, I cannot. I can't. I don't know why. It just, oh my gosh. I can't remember. It was a long time ago, but I remember being in a car with like somebody who was playing like modern country music, and it was actually painful for me. Like it hurt to be in the car. It's just like I can't explain. So I guess maybe I'm that way, the same way this lady was about comics. Like that's how I feel about modern country. Or somebody's like, I'm really into pop country, and I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't know that was a thing. I don't do that. All right. You guys, we're getting so close here. Getting so close. Yet so far away. Yeah, I remember in art school, I used to have to defend comics all the time, you know, like, and this is like the early 2000s, you know. But I remember multiple times having to bring like Mouse or like, you know, like a big like epic graphic novel into class just to show the teacher that there's like art being made here, you know. But that hasn't happened in years. Like that kind of like bias, at least from what I've experienced, you know. I'd be really curious to hear like a younger art student like and their experience dealing with the reaction to comics, because I would imagine it's a little different now, because it's such a part of pop culture now too. It's like, you know, half of the movies out there are, you know, comic book related. And I will say on that front, like librarians made a big difference. It's why I always like kind of encourage people to like ask, you know, libraries to like order my books and stuff. Cause like libraries were like a game changer. They were one of the first to kind of realize that comics are like a really valid form of literature and a valid form of art. Country used to mean something. Now it's just about girls drinking whiskey and their trucks and stuff. That's what Dylan said. I always thought it would be fun to write a country album where every song was about a truck. Like just a truck love song album. Where it starts and it's all about, you know, the different elements of the truck, like different functions that the truck has, but then it starts just getting more and more like creepily romantic. Like you realize like, wait a minute, this isn't just about liking driving a truck. Like they're falling in love with their truck. Like they want to marry their truck. Like I want to do an album that does that, you know. At some point you're going to hear an album like that. It's going to be by a band that has a weird name, has no association with me. A country album that every track is a creepy love song about a truck. And when you hear it, that'll be when I did the solo album of that. At some point, I'm going to make it happen. I think it would be fun to collab with Jim Lujan on that. I think Jim could make a real good pop country duo album. Love songs to the truck. Thomas said it seems like manga is the one that's looked down upon these days. Yeah, and like what's weird is the one thing I do understand about that, which I don't think people should look down on manga, but when an art student's a young student, and they're learning how to draw like from life, right? Or they're learning the fundamentals. It's like I can understand why an art teacher would want you to break from the template that you've memorized, just to kind of learn drawing and then kind of return to that template later on. But if somebody actually is like, you know, talking down on manga in general, like that's a fool's errand at this point. I think manga is like at this point, like some of the best selling books of all time in the US are manga. And it has such a like just vast influence on everything in US comics. But I can also understand with like superhero stuff, like if you went to art school and you just wanted to draw like Batman over and over again, I can understand a teacher being like, okay, we got to stop drawing Batman, right? Just kind of in a similar way that I could understand a teacher saying, hey, like I like Snoopy a lot, but like don't draw Snoopy for like every assignment, because we're not just learning how to draw Snoopy, we're learning how to draw in general. That I totally get. But I think like when it becomes an actual hate of the medium, that's where it gets real stupid. Dylan was saying it's definitely popular now. It's outselling US comics. Well, I think it's outselling more than just US comics. I think it's outselling most books. Like, it's just like clearly a very successful form of storytelling, you know? And I think maybe some of it comes from ignorance, kind of like I think when I was younger and people had that bias against comics, a lot of it comes from ignorance of the manga that's out there. Like, so maybe they think it would be kind of equivalent to like if somebody was like, novels are trash, and then you ask them like what novels they've read, and I'm just talking about books, right? And all they've read are like R.L. Stine Goosebumps or something. And it's like, which by the way, nothing wrong with R.L. Stine's Goosebumps, but you know what I mean? If that's all you've read and that's your only perception of what books are, you know, and then you like are given like, I don't know, like The Grapes of Wrath or The Great Gatsby or something, then like you might change your tune, you know? I think it's very similar with manga, where I think a lot of people who talk trash on manga have just not been exposed to enough to see the breadth of stories that they do. Philip said all the original novels of the Universal monsters were done like that. Oh, nice. Country used to be pretty punk and anti-establishment. Yep. Oh, yeah. Outlaw country was like where it was at. And I still, to this day, would like be a fan of probably like outlaw country style stuff, you know? Because it had kind of roots in a similar movement to like the folk movement, you know? Which was really like the folk movement used to be really punk rock, like very, very political too. What do we got here? I'm so sorry for yawning, guys. You need to see my previous comment for that to make sense. Okay, Philip, I was a little curious if I missed something. Let me scroll up. Hey, look at that. Look at that. Would you look at that? Let me scroll up and see what you were saying, Philip. Oh, grade 8 English lit. We read the original Dracula, but the teacher got graphic novel versions. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. There was I think it was Marvel, I think, put out like Marvel literature or something. Like they did a bunch of the classics. I think it was called the classic. Gosh, I'm forgetting. But I know what you're talking about, Philip. I know what you're talking about because I've heard tale of these things. Quite a lot of these things. Did my Photoshop just freeze at like the worst time? Here, let's close out of some programs here. Let's close out of Illustrator because I had Adobe Illustrator open, so maybe that'll help kind of help it wake up. Wake up. I feel like anytime you say wake up now, it has to be the System of a Down wake up. No, I'm kind of an acoustic junkie. I like the sound of like an acoustic, and there's something real raw and great about like those early country songs. And arguably a lot of country is like the birth of rock and roll too. Like there's a band called Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys that most music historians kind of cite as like one of the first precursors to rock and roll. And if you haven't heard Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys, you should, because it's awesome. It's like rad music, and then in the background you have Bob Wills going, "Oh yeah, ha ha." They didn't write like crazy deep songs. I think one of their songs was about I think it was called Roly Poly, and it was about like a really chubby kid. But they're great. Like I love Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys. They used to put out vinyls too that were actually the shape of Texas, which are like really rare now because like people bought it because they're like, oh, this is so cool. It's like the vinyl itself is the shape of Texas, and then they'd put it on the record player and it would like ruin their needle because like once it got to the end it would be like so they're really rare, like the Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys Texas vinyl, Texas shaped vinyl, because most people like got rid of them and just bought it on a regular vinyl because they're just like I can't lose more needles on my record player. Gospel and blues had a child and its name was rock and roll. A lot of early gospel's great too. Have you guys heard the Staple Singers? I really like the Staple. That's been my jam like the last few years, has been like the Staple Singers. Like a lot of soul and like early funk is like has been my jam lately. Dylan said, most of the time if I hear sickness or down, I think of Down with the Sickness. So we're doing this face. This shouldn't take too long at all. Quote me on this in an hour. But like I said, I think this one will go pretty quick. I think we might actually be close, guys. Oh, you know what? Let's do the sky first. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, Philip, but I think I know exactly the books you're thinking of, but I might be thinking the wrong ones. But I'm pretty sure Marvel put out these. It might have been called Marvel Classics or Classics Illustrated. And I know they had like Dracula. By the way, that book, man, Dracula is amazing. I know. Hot take here. But I remember, when I was a kid, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was just such an absorbing book because of the way it's done, like diary entries. I just remember being like totally lost in that book. And for quite a bit of time, I got really obsessed with vampires because of that book. Like, that book is just so excellent. I often hear people like compare Frankenstein to Dracula, and I don't think Mary Shelley's book is as good. Like, I think Dracula is just in the sense of like the craft of writing and storytelling. I think Dracula is like hands down one of the best. Dylan said greatest illustrated classics. It might have been. I think it was called Marvel Classics or Marvel Illustrated Classics. But Marvel had a series where they did kind of like early precursors to graphic novels. You know, at that time, it would have just been, you know, a trade or something like that. But I think they started doing those in like the 60s. Oh my goodness, guys. I had my selection all selected, and then I had to... This is the problem of doing the selections the way I'm doing them here. I just need to do chunks at a time because that'll go a lot quicker. I have 2 copies of Dracula. I've been meaning to read it. I might have to listen on it on audio book since it's old-timey language. Dude, I should get that on audiobook. Like, because that would be a good book read out loud. Like, if it's read by the right person. But I will tell you, it's like, it's just, there's something about the way, I'm forgetting the character's name. I think it's Lucy. But like the way they do it in diary entries as she's slowly like losing consciousness to Dracula's powers, and just that something about the diary thing just makes it real, like visceral. And yeah, like I remember like I was pretty young when I first read that, but like, yeah, that one just sucks you in as a story. I think Frankenstein is a good story as a premise. Like, I think the concept of Frankenstein is really strong. I just don't think the book itself is as like masterful as people think it is. And I love the concept of Frankenstein. And some of the movies of Frankenstein are great, like the old movies, but it's like the book itself was not as, at least for me, when I was younger and I read it, I was like, oh, this is nowhere near as good as Dracula. Like, Dracula was just like a masterwork, you know? Yeah, Philip was saying Shelley wasn't really a formal author. She wrote it as a challenge. Yeah, and it's not bad. It's and the story of it is great, and it's kind of obviously stood the test of time as like iconic. Like, the story beats are good. It's just the writing itself is not as fluid. Okay. So guys, we are almost done with the second panel here. So much quicker when I don't have as much background. Most of this book has like a lot of background work. And so this is some of the few pages where it's like a fairly flat background. Bride of Frankenstein is still the best of the 30s Universal movies. I love those. I will tell you, the best adaptation, I have not seen the modern Nosferatu, so I don't know, but the best adaptation of of Dracula, in my opinion, is the silent movie Nosferatu. That movie is absolutely terrifying. It is so good. So if you can, like, there's usually a colorized version of it. Don't watch the colorized version. Watch one of the collection ones where they have like the old piano music playing over it. But don't watch one with like a modern, symphonic thing over it. But if you can find like a black and white copy of that original Nosferatu, we have one on DVD that I like absolutely love. That is just like art, man. That's like one of the best horror movies. And the fact that it's a silent movie and it's still like creepy as hell, just the way they designed Nosferatu and stuff, and the acting, it's just so good. So good. But yes, Bride of Frankenstein is great. There was also that, I haven't seen this in years, but when I was a kid, my grandparents used to watch that Abbott and Costello. There was like an Abbott and Costello, I think, with Frankenstein. I think it had a bunch of the Universal monsters in it. Am I crazy? But yeah, that Abbott and Costello is pretty awesome. I would love to rewatch that. Dylan said, I have a deluxe illustrated edition of Dracula and Frankenstein. The Dracula one has a history of the book and 2 short stories that inspired the story, The Vampire and some other story. Nice. Sounds really cool. Yeah, that's something I'm really looking forward to when I'm done with this book. The first thing I'm going to do when I finish this book that I'm working on is read. I have a stack of graphic novels that I still haven't read. That has just piled taller and taller. And I just can't read it because it's like, when am I going to read comics? I'm making comics, or I'm working on, prepping for my classes and stuff. So like, that's one thing that's been like, the prize, this is a trick I would recommend all people when they're working on books do, but it's like, I'm going to give myself a prize when I finish this book. And that's the prize, is I'm going to allow myself to read a couple books and just chill and enjoy reading. Like, because I love reading so much. And that is the one downside of working on comics, is like, you really don't have, especially on a deadline, it's like, I just don't have time to like stop and read a book. The only book I've been able to read recently was one on like a couple education books, that I have to read for class, but it's like, and even those I'm like reading more kind of like with a highlighter to kind of like remember stuff. So, but just casually reading, man, I miss that. I miss that. I feel like I've had a year or two where I haven't been able to do that in a long time. Dylan said, I saw one of the Abbott and Costello meets X Universal monster movies and I didn't like it. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, literally at my grandparents. Because they used to, I feel like we'd go over to their house and they had that and like Fred Astaire movies. And then, and it wasn't even a house. It was like one of those old people hotels, or not hotels, like an old person's apartment complex. Like a senior living apartment complex. But we'd go over there and like, watch Fred Astaire, Sound of Music. They had the Sound of Music. They used to watch that all the time, the Sound of Music. And then, yeah, like every once in a while, like I could convince them to watch the Abbott and Costello Universal Monsters one. So I'd like to see it again, The design of those are some of your prettiest books. Yeah, the quality of hardbacks that are available nowadays is just amazing. Like, one of my favorite designers is Jessica Hish. I don't know if you've ever seen her stuff, but like she does a lot of the like Barnes and Noble like special edition covers. They look all Victorian and cool, and they have all this beautiful like, you know, metallic Pantones like on the covers of the books, and they're usually leather bound. They're so beautiful. But yeah, I have a ton of books I got to read. The 2 last Daniel Klaus books, I have those sitting in my room. I have like a ton of books that I've backed Kickstarters for, of like friends, and those have come in. I just got the Horror A4 from Gaz. Those finally came in, and I'm really excited about reading those, but like I haven't been able to read anything. Like I just don't have the time. Yeah, they met Frankenstein and Dracula. And he said, I thought it was hysterical when I was little. Yeah, when I was a kid, it was cool because it had Frankenstein and Dracula, and it had a lot of really goofy, like slapstick horror scenes. And I have not seen it since. So I'd be kind of curious. In fact, maybe tonight, when I'm done with this, I'll see if it's on like on YouTube or something. They've got to have like the Abbott and Costello one. I would imagine that probably is on YouTube for free. I don't know, but it'd be fun to see how much it holds up, and then also does it have like a bunch of like really bad old timey stuff that now would be like really inappropriate. But I did like really value going over to my grandparents back then, because like they also turned me on to like some really amazing movies. Like they would watch Lawrence of Arabia. And I remember just as a kid, just like, I don't know if like this kind of shows you the type of weird like patience I have as a moviegoer or as a reader. But I remember as a kid just being transfixed by it. Like I was not bored at all. And my sisters would get really bored. And I was just like, this is an amazing movie. Like, I'm like, you know, I'm like 5 years old at the time, and I'm just like watching Lawrence of Arabia. Like it's the most amazing thing. Which is a movie that like bores the pants out of like most people, you know. I've been like that for a long time. Like I have I've always had a love of like the slow burn or like the long story. I think it's why Andor was so cool, because it was very slow. It was a slow build, but it was like intriguing each time, you know. And I know people who just don't have that that love of like a really drawn out story, you know. But I really like those like really drawn out stories. But yeah, there were a couple things I saw over there that, you know, and as a kid, I really liked Fred Astaire movies a lot too. So I really was a fan of like the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers movies. We saw Bringing Up Baby there, which is like, Bringing Up Baby to this day is one of the funniest slapstick comedies you'll ever see. Oh, Philip said you have to rent it on YouTube. I wonder, I'm going to have to peek around and see if it's on anything else. Yeah, that was always fun going over to my grandparents' house, because they'd have that that old school TV that that you pull the knob thing and it goes boom, like you know, and you had to like turn it to the correct channel to get the VHS to work. It'd be like topunk topunk topunk, like when you change the channels. But yeah, they were real old movie buffs, you know. And that didn't make sense to me as much as a kid. Philip said, I think I found a place where you can watch it though. Okay, let me know. Yeah, I found a place. I mean, I almost said I found a place. I, as a kid, always thought it was weird they watched these like kind of old timey movies, but as I'm getting older, I can definitely see the charm in it because I do find myself being less connected to like modern films and more connected to like the films that came out, you know, in my 20s or earlier. And like, you know, like a lot of modern films, like I'll kind of keep track, but you kind of lose touch with the pop culture when it comes to movies because, I mean, frankly, as an adult, like when do you have time to watch movies? You know, like the Chiltern Classic Edition of Dracula, but the pages are high gloss and feel like plastic. I really want to get the now I'm blanking out on his name. Oh my gosh, I need to get the Dracula that's by like one of the best cartoonists on the planet. And I just blanked out on his name. And he's like an influence on my work too. And I'm blanking out on his name. Lots of cross-hatching. Beautiful stuff. You guys will know. Let me know in the chats. I'm having an old man moment, blanking out. He did like Swamp Thing and stuff back in the day. Same illustrator. But I still don't have his Dracula. Or not Dracula, his Frankenstein. Paul said, hi, Philip. Hi, Dylan. Hi, Paul. How's it going, buddy? What time is it in your parts? You guys, we're getting real close. Real close here. Sophie is now pretending to talk to Elizabeth's dead brother. Paul said Gorey. No, not Edward Gorey, although I love Edward Gorey. No, the Swamp Thing guy. The guy who did Swamp Thing, and he did like one of the best illustrated Frankensteins ever done. I just can't believe I'm blanking out on it. I'll look it up. Edward Gorey's great though. One of my favorite Edward Gorey things was the intro to Masterpiece Theater. Do you guys remember that? He did this amazing animated intro to Masterpiece Theater, and as a kid, I was like, "This is the coolest animation I have ever seen." Almost 2 a.m. Woke up in the middle of the night. Oh no. Well, I hope you're able to get some rest. But I'm glad to keep you company while you're awake. How are they? Oh, cool. Philip sent me a link on Facebook Messenger. I'm going to click that link once I'm done with these colors and watch me some Abbott and Costello. I don't even remember much about it, just that as a kid, again, it was one of the few ways to watch something that I was into at my grandma and grandpa's house. It was a mystery. Oh, mystery, yeah. It was Mystery Theater, not Masterpiece Theater. Thank you. But Mystery Theater would have like, yeah, because that's the era of like, is it sachets like Poirot, and then like the BBC Panorama Sherlock Holmes. They used to play that after those intros. Yeah, it was Mystery Theater. You're right. Vincent Price was the best host of that too. Yeah, I grew up watching that because my mom was obsessed with mystery novels. Like that was kind of her favorite genre. And so anything mystery like Agatha Christie or Sherlock Holmes or Poirot, like any of that stuff was like constantly being watched by my mom. And I'd watch with her too. Paul said it's a treat to see you drawing. Thank you. Yeah, Vincent Price was great as a host of that too. That was a good show. And it was a really crazy good cast of actors too at that time. Because like again, I don't think anybody's done Poirot as well as Sachet, and then I don't think there's ever been a better Sherlock Holmes than Jeremy Brett's. Thomas Adams said, my mom loved Agatha Christie as well. Yeah, and I remember this came out a while ago, but I remember going to see Knives Out and being really pleased by it because it was like a very cheesy Agatha Christie murder mystery. And it was just fun to see somebody finally do, you know, like a murder mystery where it's like the detective, you know, like takes them to the table to kind of like they're all in a room and they have to figure out who done it. It is a fun genre. I can see why my mom liked it so much. I'm also thankful that, like, you know, around the house, like I had a lot of readers. Sawing some serious logs, cutest thing ever. What does that mean? Oh, sawing logs is like snoring, right? That's hilarious. I haven't heard sawing. I haven't seen the second one. Philip said Knives Out. I love it, and he said the third one's coming out in a few weeks. How was the second one? I'm curious about it. I should see if that's streaming. That would be fun to watch too. Okay, all we have to do is finish Elizabeth, and then we're gonna do a color hold on the sky. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with me on a Saturday night, or in some of your cases on a Sunday morning. Should have been there on a Sunday morning. What was that band? I'm trying to remember now. There was a band that had a song about a Sunday morning. Get a ball Blair on a Sunday morning. Oh my gosh, you guys. This is where I get when I'm overworked and undersleeped. Oh, nice. Philip said the second one wasn't quite as good, but I still really liked it, and it's on Netflix. I like that character. I think he was a really good investigator, kind of detective. But the first one just felt like awesome for like people who did like mystery theater back in the day. And that's actually something, you know, I used to watch with my parents like a lot, you know, because they were always so good. They were such good shows, you know. All right, let's see here. Netflix made a deal with Rian Johnson for sequel rights. Okay. Bernie Wrightson was the artist I was trying to remember. Thank you. I can't believe I forgot. But yeah, I still don't own his Frankenstein, and I really need to. Like, I look at those pages a lot, but I'll just look at like ones from online, you know? I've never owned that book. And it's like, it's almost sinful that I don't own it. Thank you, Thomas. I'm glad you chimed in there. That would have bugged me. But yeah, Wrightson, like I got really influenced by his work too. When I was working on Two Stories, which doesn't look anything like Wrightson, but I was looking at a lot of Wrightson at the time. But I still don't own that book. Thomas said my Google foo is strong. I was gonna Google it, but I can't while I'm coloring. But I was gonna Google afterwards, and you saved me. You saved me. My hero, Thomas Adams. I'm really excited about Paul the commercial. I can't wait. I cannot wait. Because the bits that I've seen of it, Paul, are amazing. And I know you said you're still kind of editing some of it, but like, oh man, I really want to show that on stream at some point because it's just incredible what you made. Paul made a pretty phenomenal trailer for this channel that I cannot wait to share with you guys. Some pretty incredible animations with his character Detective Perez and a couple another character from the book as well. And I'm pretty excited about how that came out. So, you know, on a future live stream when Paul feels good about what he's got there, I will share it with you guys on a break. We were on a break. All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out with me. We're not quite done yet. I'm going to basically do the color hold on the sky. Paul said, I'm excited too, Josh. Maybe a week or two to finish. I haven't had a lot of time. Hey, man, there is no rush, my dude. What you've done is just above and beyond it. It looks so cool. So, but I am excited about sharing it. Let's do the color hold on this. I don't know, Philip, are you still planning on live streaming, my dude? Because it might be a little late, but I don't know. If you're still live streaming, let us know. Because if you're planning on live streaming, I'm done in like almost now, actually. Edit, paste in place. We're gonna lock this. Cool. So Philip said he's still gonna go live and he's still wide awake, which is awesome. So I'm gonna just get this part done here with the color hold of the sky. And we'll just darken it just a little bit. Up the saturation. And we are done with this page, guys. So thank you for hanging out with me while I did this. I think it's come out pretty good. That's one more. Philip said, I don't sleep anymore. So if you guys are still up and hanging out and want to hang out with an artist while they work, go to Philip Chandler's channel. He's going to be live streaming and give him some love. But before you do, hit that like button. Hit the bell so you get notifications when I'm about to go live. Make sure you're subscribed, and I appreciate each and every one of you who stopped by. It's always fun to catch up and hang out, guys. And I'm going to call it. So go over to Philip's channel, Philip Chandler. If you're looking for it, it's Philip Chandler Art. So look up Philip Chandler Art. And Philip said, congrats, looking good. Yeah, and I hope you have a good stream, Philip. I'm going to go either watch Abbott and Costello or Knives Out 2. All right. Oh, Dylan said how many pages left? Let's see. Like 60-ish, 65, something like that. So we're getting there. All right, guys, have a good night, and I will see you on the next live stream. Bye.